Well, the primary season is up on us, and the election is right around the corner. And the conventions, that's right, they're coming up just as fast as a car speeding behind you. But the question becomes, are you registered to vote? Are you voting? Who are going to be the candidates? It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric LaVille. You're joining us for our 2024 election preview show. We'll be right back in just a moment. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric LaVille. Once again, we want to thank you for joining us as you always do on a Sunday morning. It's a beautiful morning here in Hampton Roads, and it's always good to talk about the state of the water. But even more so, it's a very special day. I want to wish all the fathers out there a happy Father's Day. Because, listen, I don't know about you, but I lost my father a couple of years ago, but he was the greatest man that I knew, definitely my best friend, and God blessed us to have him for almost 81 years. So with that, I know how important it is to have your father. I'm a father myself. I wouldn't trade that title in for nothing in the world. So hats off to all the fathers. Hopefully you enjoy your day. And those that are there that have your fathers, make sure you do everything you can to cherish them. And again, love you, Dad, the late, great Wilford Claville Jr. So for the month of June, all of you know that we are doing our election preview show. With that election preview show, we're talking about the primaries, the general election, and on this particular month, we're talking about voter engagement. That's right. Registering to vote, the importance of voting, the issues, the candidates, the impact, and what is on the horizon. Well, listen, I'm excited to have with us today someone that's been doing it on a national level for many years, and that's none other than Mr. Wisdom Cole. He's the Senior National Director of Advocacy, and currently he is the National Director for the NAACP Youth and College Division. Mr. Cole, thank you so much for joining us here on Stay the Water.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Claville.
Absolutely. Look, before the show, you and I were talking about when we first met, and I remember we were in D.C. At one of the Pharrell events. By the way, hats off to Virginia Beach native Pharrell Williams, he's making a social impact across the board, social, economic, the whole nine. He's a movement all to himself. But in D.C., he hosted a forum, and we were part of it. President Adams Gaston, myself, we talked about student loan forgiveness, and Mr. Cole was there. And in that particular session, Mr. Pharrell, he actually forgave, the student loans of several students, one being one of my former students that had her loans forgiven, Jamie Turner, and several others. It was a total surprise. And Mr. Cole was there, fighting for student loan forgiveness. And we actually met in 2019 as well. So, Mr. Cole, you've been doing it, like I said, at a high level and engagement for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a phenomenal event, because it was very critical in that period of time to show that student loan forgiveness was possible and the impacts that would have changed for HBCU students, right? These are young graduates who are trying to find their way in the world and facing the heavy burden of student loan debt. And so to see that eliminated for them gives them the opportunity to pursue law school, gives them the opportunity to become homeowners, to build discretionary wealth. But more so importantly, it's an opportunity to reduce the racial wealth gap in America today. And so to be able to partner with Mr. Pharrell Williams and the Team Yellow was such an important and a great opportunity to really demonstrate power and what needs to be done in this moment in time. And so as of today, we are continually seeing student loan debt be canceled for millions of Americans across this country because of the efforts, because of the advocacy, because of our stories.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, if you go back, those that are listening, you'll see an article that talks about the NAACP joining the Student Debt Cancellation Advocates at the Department of Education during hearings and so forth. And you'll see Mr. Cole out there with a sign saying cancel student debt. You mentioned how student loan debt and impacts just young people being able to be homeowners and really just being able, especially HBCU students, being able to really capture the American dream. And that was really done by the Biden administration coming back and creating policy. When they say elections have consequences, I think we could point right to student loan cancellation and say it has consequences, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. This was a campaign promise that President Biden had made on the campaign trail, right? This was in the midst of a global pandemic when people didn't know what was going on. But people still took this promise and turned out, particularly young people, coming out in droves, believing in this mission, believing in this vision that we can eliminate student loan debt. And because of that, we've been able to see change happen in real time. And so we know that student debt is absolutely a voting issue, but it was only made possible because people had turned out during that election.
Absolutely. Speaking of elections and the importance of it, let's look at 2024. Now, a lot of people are calling this the rematch. You have our current president, Joe Biden, who actually beat former President Donald Trump, who is, for all intents and purposes, Brother Cole, he's going to be the nominee for the Republican Party. As a matter of fact, I don't call it the Republican Party. I call it the party of Trump because that's really what it is. But it is a rematch. And a lot of polls are showing, even myself, that this race is going to be closer probably than it really should be, just to be very honest with you. But how important, if you could just take a few moments, and I know you do this work all day, but how important is this 2024 election?
We always say that the election is the most important in our lifetime, and this one absolutely is, right? It is so important for us to make sure that we are using our power, using our voice, uplifting the issues that are most important in this moment, because this election is really going to decide the future of democracy, right? We have faced so many challenges the last couple of years with the Supreme Court. Right, there is an opportunity or future where the Supreme Court is fully conservative and will not be able to move on the issues that are important to us, as we've seen from abortion rights to student debt to the right to love. Right, these are all things that are critical to this generation and the next. This election is an opportunity for us to demonstrate power, to be able to show that folks are still engaged and still care and still demand more of our government to serve our needs, right? I think that this election will really have impacts for generations to come. And so it's so important that we stay engaged, right? There is this narrative right now that is pushing for us to not be engaged, for us to not lean in. And I disagree. I think that when we are upset, when we are frustrated, when there are things that are not being served, that is the time when we must engage more than ever, right? We have to be talking to our elected officials. We have to be making sure that issues that are most important to us are at the top of their mind.
Absolutely. And that kind of dovetails into a discussion that I want to have with our listeners about being engaged. A lot of people see our government, and you see these very stately and stoic buildings. You see our elected officials that are in the front around a lot of security. A lot of times they're elevating on platforms, they're talking. We see these multi-million-dollar commercials and so forth. But at the end of the day, they're our representatives to government for policies and issues that are affecting us. How do we educate and really encourage just an everyday citizen? How do you stay engaged in with your elected official and with these issues that we're experiencing that you mentioned?
Yeah, so I think anything, right, it's about relationships. Relationships matter the most, right? With any person in your family, with any person in your life, anybody in your school, anybody in your community, it's about maintaining the relationships. It's the same thing with our elected officials, right? We are voting them into office, right? And once we vote, it's not just the end of that process. It's about staying engaged 365 days a year. It's about making sure that you are understanding what type of policy and legislation they're putting forth. More so, what type of plans are they going to actually implement once they're in office? And so I think this is a really great opportunity to take stock of what has happened over the last 4 years. What has worked in our favor and what hasn't? What do we want to see moving forward, and what needs to stop moving forward, right? I think that this is an opportunity for us to really make the demands that we need to see move forward, right? Everything from inflation and the cost of living to good paying jobs, to gun violence, to climate change, all of those things are on the ballot. I think it's really important for us to make sure that we are engaging with these issues, but also listening to our community. And part of that starts by starting at the ground level, right? Making sure people know the steps necessary to turn out to vote. Do you know your polling location? Are you registered to vote? Have you updated your voter registration status, right? You know what is actually on the ballot. I think that this election is more important than ever because it's also an election about misinformation, right? There's so many different sources that are saying this and saying that. It's important for us to identify the trusted messengers in our community and uplift what they are saying.
Wow. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric LaVille, and you're joining us for our election preview show for 2024. For the entire month in June, we're bringing to you individuals who have been doing it for years in the community, on the ground, fighting for issues, advocating for you, and also the right to vote. Joining us, we have with us Wisdom Cole, who is currently the Senior National Director of Advocacy for the NAACP, and in his previous role, he was the National Director for NAACP Youth and College Division, where he served more than 700 youth councils, high school chapters, and college chapters actively involved in the fight for civil rights. Mr. Cole, you mentioned finding out what's on the ballot. And I think before we get to the ballot, the very first thing I think that's the most important in this fight for elections and issues is registering to vote. You know, in your former position as the National Director for the Youth and College Division for the NAACP, you work with high schoolers, college students. I mean, that's how I met you here on college campus here at Norfolk State University. You know, every day somebody's turning 18, and every day is an opportunity to register to vote. But it seems like we're constantly pushing and encouraging and talking about the importance of registering to vote. Tell us a little bit about the efforts of the NAACP from your perspective, because you've done it on a high level, you've done it for years. Why is it still important to register to vote, and how can we get the effort out there for people to do it?
You know, registering to vote is an essential process in our civic engagement efforts, right? When we're thinking about this upcoming election, there are a potential of over 40 million new voters, right, including 18 million who are newly reaching voting age since 2022. That is a lot of power. Let's even think about a bigger number, right? Let's think about the total amount of Gen Zers and millennials that we have. These are the two largest living blocks in America today. If all of those folks come together and vote and have an agenda, we are able to push the state of our nation in the direction of progress. And so it's absolutely important for us to understand how our power starts with just registering to vote, right? It takes literally 30 seconds just to check your status using vote.org, which is a partner that we work with at the NAACP to ensure that we are registering people to vote and checking their voter registration status. There's also a voter registration gap that we must close, right? The access to understanding the ability to do that, right? Making sure that people are able to do that in different locations, from the library to their campus to when they are signing up to get their driver's license, right? Registering to vote should be like getting your driver's license, should be like learning how to drive for the first time, should be like registering for your college course, right? It should be processes that are inundated or incorporated into our day-to-day functions. And so starting with voter registration is the absolute key to our election.
Absolutely. You know, and then we talk about issues on the ballot. Now, we know from Kofi Annan, he said it, the former UN director, he said that, the general secretary actually, all politics is local. You know, we've heard it on every level. And, of course, we see the national commercials for president, but really the greatest impact of policy is on that local level, school board, city council, even your local representative for a state delegate or representative and so forth. You know, how important is it to get engaged in those local meetings, local town halls, those local NAACP chapters, and also, you know, the local party activities?
Yeah, you know, you said it best. All politics is local, and the local politics impacts you the very next day. It's important for us to recognize that there are a plethora of elections that are happening this year, but also as elections happen every single year. One of my friends says, don't call it an off year, right? Part of what we want to make sure we're doing is building a voting culture that is engaged in democracy. But making sure that you are engaged with what's happening locally tells you how to impact your city, right? The district attorney impacts you tomorrow. Those ballot measures impact you tomorrow. It's important for us to make sure that we are engaged all the way down the ballot because that is things that impact you and your community, right? Even thinking about our young people who are under the age of 18 and can't vote yet, right? There are so many things and so many conversations around education and diversity, equity, inclusion, and making sure that we are teaching the true history to our young people. And so even though it might not directly impact you, it definitely impacts somebody that you love. It definitely impacts somebody that you care about. And this definitely will impact our entire community. And so engaging in your local community, joining the local NAACP, which has been a quintessential part to holding up the fabric of democracy, which means people are constantly poll working, are poll watching, are supporting to make sure that the infrastructure of these elections from the local to the state to the national level actually work for Black America.
Absolutely. You know, the right to vote, according to the late, great John R. Lewis, it is the most powerful nonviolent weapon we have in our democracy. You know, speaking of the right to vote, you know, it seems as if, you know, even since, you know, men's suffrage, women's suffrage, and of course the passing of the Voting Rights Act, there's always been a fight to stop, you know, the masses, more specifically, you know, African Americans, women, minorities, those that are disenfranchised from voting. You know, that I think should tell us a lot about the power of the ballot, the power of the ballot box. As a matter of fact, according to American Progress, it showed that the fight for the right to vote, being a long story history, that over the past decade, states have adopted at least 94 laws that make it harder for Americans to vote. And every year, state legislators continue to introduce hundreds more. Now, we know that where we have mostly Democratic legislators and the legislators, you know, where they block these efforts. So they're introducing bills, but they not necessarily pass, but 94 have, right? You know, what can we do to raise the alarm that we can't, like you said, take any year off? There's no off year, but at the same time, there is no off time to protect the right to vote.
Yeah, you know, we are being attacked at every single level. And it's very important to recognize that this is a targeted attack on our communities, right? You know, oftentimes we talk with young people about the importance of voting and what people have done to ensure that we have this right. But we have to also talk about what we have to do to protect it and to further it, right? You know, there should be opportunities for everybody across this nation to register to vote online. There should be opportunities for everybody in this country to receive their ballot at home. There should be opportunities for everybody in this country to register to vote the very same day as Election Day, right? These are all things that help and support and encourage democracy in our country. But there are concerted attacks to make sure this happens. And so part of what we have to realize is that it is up to our current and next generation to make sure that we are protecting these rights, right? We have to recognize that these are all connected to the issues that we care most about. Something that we talk about oftentimes within the NAACP is that every single issue is connected to the ballot. Every issue can be legislated. Every issue can be protected. And if we want to ensure a future, we have to make sure that it starts with our rights to vote.
Absolutely. And on the national level, according to the Center for American Progress, to help restore and bolster voter protections, it's critical that Congress pass the Freedom to Vote Act and the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act itself. You know, Brother Cole, you know, NAACP has been around a long time, you know, and it was created around the right to vote. But there are other issues that the NAACP has that are engaging in, you know, not just fighting for the right to vote, but fighting for the rights of all people. Tell us a little bit about some of the issues that are out there that you're active in your division, and also for advocating nationally, and where the youth division is also active.
Yeah, the Youth and College Division, which is made up of over 30,000 young people across this nation who are engaged in the fight for civil rights, really is honed in on a couple key issues, right? Over the last couple of years, we have really been working on the student debt cancellation fight and making sure that we are making education accessible for all Americans. And so what that means is also making sure that we are ensuring that college is affordable, right? Making sure that we are not raising tuition, that we're not making it inaccessible. In addition, all across the country, we are seeing a concerted effort to tag our institutions that celebrate diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so part of that is making sure that our institutions are committing to diversity no matter what. After last summer's gutting of affirmative action, we are no longer protected in this country when it comes to allowing us to attend and be in these ivory towers, right? I heard just out of Ohio, they are eliminating minority scholarships, right? Things that provide opportunities for myself included to be able to attend these colleges and universities. And so it's important for us to make sure that we are working on the state level and the local level, which goes back to our other conversation, to ensure that these things are protected at these institutions. We constantly are training our young people to meet with their administration, to meet with their local elected officials, to make sure that they're building those relationships. So when those things are happening and those attacks are happening, we are able to make sure that they are informed about what their voting base cares about, right? Young people care about gun violence. Young people care about police violence. Young people care about climate change. And these are all things that we have to make sure are at the top of mind for all of our elected officials. And so young people are organizing each and every single day to make sure that those rights are protected. But in addition, young people in this year, 2024 and beyond, care about foreign policy, right? We're seeing across the nation encampments of young people who are standing up and coming together and recognizing how they can uplift their voice and their power in this moment in time. And so we have to acknowledge that power of young people and give them the opportunity to carry that out. We have to go from the protests to the polls. We have to make sure that we are carrying it all the way through and demonstrating power at the highest level.
Absolutely. And when we talk about, power at the highest level, one area of that power is the law, the bench. As a matter of fact, according to a recent outlook on 7 big issues at stake in 2024 election, NBC News laid out several. Of course, many of those dealt with health care access. Of course, this being the 14th year anniversary of Obamacare, Affordable Care Act. Also, trade and policy, taxes, abortion, and also other issues. But one issue that's very important, it showed judges in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court has been in the news quite a bit the past 4 years, especially the last couple of years. But it states that the track record between current President Biden and former President Trump is clear. Trump picked young conservative judges to serve on the federal bench, while Biden picked liberals with a focus on professional and personal diversity. We all know that President Biden, of course, nominated, and she was actually confirmed as the first African-American justice on the U.S. Supreme Court in the history, female that is, but the history of the country. Over 400 years, and we're finally here, with a black female on the U.S. Supreme Court, well-deserved. What are some of the efforts of the NAACP as it relates to those, of some of the turning back the clock, if I can say, of various rights that the current courts on the lower federal court and the Supreme Court have instituted?
Yeah, we are drawing a line in the sand, right? We are partnering and aligning with our fellow civil rights organizations and progressive organizations to ensure that we say the buck stops here, that we have to move forward. We can't go back, right? We want to make sure that we are inundating our community with messages of hope and not taking us back to a 1960s reality or further. And so part of that is making sure that we are affirming the people who are being put in place, right? We were out there in front of the Supreme Court when Ketanji Brown Jackson, or as we like to say, KBJ, was confirmed, because the impact it has for millions of Americans is going to be great. The impact it has for the black community, the impact it has for black women right, to understand their power at that highest level is absolutely necessary. Part of what we want to do and part of what we do within the NAACP Youth in College is recognize that we have a lot of young leaders who are interested in that as their future, right, and showing them that they have the opportunity to connect and engage and to be the leaders of today and tomorrow in those spaces. And so part of what we have to do is we have to control the narrative, right? We have to showcase how we are moving forward and not moving back. But part of that also means that we are actually taking that fight to the Supreme Court, to the state level, making sure that we are combating with actual legislation to ensure that we are protecting our freedoms.
Absolutely. And protection of freedoms first starts at the ballot box and being engaged on the ground floor. Wisdom Co. has definitely done that with its grassroots organizing, managed national campaign efforts focused on building Black political power through youth leadership, development, and advocacy. And during his time at the NAACP, he's worked on many campaigns, such as removing police from schools, debt cancellation of student loans, and increasing voter access for young Black people. And you've seen him NPR, Vice, NBC, Washington News, the Brookings Institute, The Economist, all over. But I want to also note that in 2023, you were recognized in Politico's Recast Power List 2023, honoring those who are changing the world through race and politics. You know, in our last few moments, I want to ask you and take this opportunity for you to let us know, you've worked with youth in the Youth and College Division. You were, of course, still engaged. But as the National Director for Advocacy, what's next for Wisdom Co. in the NAACP?
Right. It's making sure that our members, our leaders, our partners are plugged into our national campaigns. There's so much that happens at the NAACP every single day. And I think it's really important for our members to engage all across the country. And so I really want to be able to take this opportunity to hear from members, to hear from leaders, to see what is most important for them, right? I think it's important for us to really address this issue of gun violence in America, in our community. I think it's really important for us to address this issue of police violence in our community. I think that we have to really create tangible solutions that allow us to really determine our own destiny and have equal protection under the law. I'm really excited to make sure that all of our members, from our youth and college leaders to our adults branches and our partners, truly know the power of the NAACP and how they can engage. And part of that starts with volunteering with the NAACP. This year, we are in the process of getting 300,000 volunteers to join us for our civic engagement campaign. And so for those who are interested in joining and being a volunteer, you can go to naacp.org/volunteer to join the fight today.
Absolutely. Once again, that is Wisdom Cole, who is currently the Senior National Director for Advocacy of the NAACP and the former Youth and College Division National Director for the same, where he served more than 700 youth councils, high school chapters, and college students as well for the fight for civil rights. Well, we know that the fight for voting rights, the fight for equal rights, is a fight that continues. And as long as we have individuals like yourself engaged, we know that we're definitely, the torch being passed is in good hands. If you could, last 30 seconds, any words of wisdom, golden nuggets for our youth that are listening here, college students at Norfolk State University?
For the college students at Norfolk State University, your vote is your power. Your voice is your power. This year, it's important that you turn up and turn out and show your power all across your university, but for your state.
Absolutely. And once again, this is your host, Dr. Eric LaVille. You've been listening to State of the Water on our 2024 election preview show. Joining us, we have Wisdom Cole, who has given us words of wisdom for our youth and for all of us to continue to fight for the right to vote. Your vote, the most powerful nonviolent weapon we have in our democracy. To all those that are listening, to all the fathers, happy Father's Day. Until next time, be good, be great, God bless, and we'll see you next week.
Hi, I'm Carrie Washington, and you're listening to State of the Water with award-winning host Dr. Eric Claville.